What if I told you that the largest empire in human history was so massive that the sun literally never set on it? Not metaphorically, not as a legend, but in reality. At one point in history, this empire controlled lands on almost every continent on Earth. From North America to Asia, from Africa to Australia, its power stretched across the entire globe. Millions of people lived under its rule, different cultures, different languages, different civilizations, all connected by one empire. But here is the real question that historians still talk about today. Which empire was truly the largest in the world? And how long did it rule the planet? Was it the Roman Empire, famous for its powerful armies and legendary emperors? Or the Mongol Empire, known for conquering huge territories in an incredibly short time? Or was it something even bigger, something many people underestimate today? In this video, we are going to uncover the truth, the real story of the largest empire ever created in human history, and how long it actually ruled the world. Because the answer might surprise you. Before we reveal the biggest empire, we need to talk about the giants of history. Empires that shaped civilizations. Empires that changed the world forever. One of the first empires people think about is the Roman Empire. At its peak, Rome controlled huge parts of Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East. Roman roads connected cities across continents. Roman armies were feared everywhere, and Roman culture influenced the world for thousands of years. But surprisingly, even the mighty Roman Empire was not the largest empire in history. Another powerful empire was the Mongol Empire, and this empire was different. Unlike Rome, the Mongols expanded extremely fast. Under the leadership of Genghis Khan and his successors, they conquered vast lands across Asia and Europe. At one point, the Mongol Empire became the largest continuous land empire in human history, from China to Eastern Europe, from Siberia to the Middle East. Their expansion shocked the world. But even this massive empire was still not the biggest overall empire ever created. Because there was one empire that went even further, an empire that reached almost every part of the planet. The largest empire the world has ever seen was the British Empire. Yes, the British Empire became the biggest empire in human history. At its peak in the early 20th century, it controlled around 1/4 of the entire land area on Earth. Think about that for a moment. Almost 25% of the world's land, and about 400 million people lived under its rule. That was nearly 1/4 of the world's population at the time. This empire stretched across continents: North America, South Asia, Africa, Australia, the Caribbean, parts of the Middle East. If you looked at a world map during that time, you would see British territories everywhere. That is why people used to say something incredible about this empire. They said, "The sun never sets on the British Empire," because whenever the sun set in one part of the empire, it was rising in another part. It was truly global power, something the world had never seen before. But how did this island nation become the largest empire on Earth? The answer is a combination of exploration, trade, military power, and timing. During the 1500s and 1600s, European countries began exploring the world. New sea routes were discovered, new lands were mapped, and global trade started expanding. Britain took advantage of this moment in history. Its powerful navy allowed it to travel across oceans, establish colonies, and control important trade routes. Over time, Britain built ports and settlements around the world. Some of these places later became major countries. Places like India, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and many regions in Africa and Asia. But what made the British Empire truly unstoppable was its navy. At one point, the British Royal Navy was the strongest naval force on Earth. This allowed Britain to control global trade routes. And when you control trade, you control wealth. And when you control wealth, you gain influence and power. This is how the empire continued expanding, year after year, decade after decade, until it became the largest empire in human history. Now comes the most important question. How long did this empire rule the world? The British Empire did not appear overnight. It grew slowly over centuries. Historians usually consider the beginning of the British Empire around the late 1500s, but the empire reached its peak in the early 1900s. That means it expanded and ruled globally for roughly 300 to 400 years. Very few empires in history lasted that long while continuing to influence the world. But even though it ruled for centuries, the empire eventually started to decline. After World War I and especially after World War II, many countries under British rule began seeking independence. Slowly, nations started breaking away. India gained independence in 1947. Many African countries followed in the following decades, and gradually the empire dissolved. However, its influence did not disappear. In fact, even today, many countries still show signs of that history. English became a global language partly because of this empire. Legal systems, political systems, and cultural influences spread across continents. Even modern globalization has roots connected to this historical expansion. The British Empire reached its largest size around the year 1920. At that time, it controlled approximately 35 million square kilometers of land. That is an almost unimaginable scale. To understand this better, imagine an empire covering entire regions of the world simultaneously. Europe, Asia, Africa, and the Americas were all connected under one power. This made Britain the most influential country on Earth at the time, and many historians believe that this period defined the modern world. Trade systems, global communication, international politics, all were shaped by this massive empire. The British Empire did not just control land. It changed how the world worked. Railways were built across continents. Cities expanded. Global trade networks formed. But this history is also complex, because while the empire brought development to some regions, it also brought conflict, control, and resistance. Many people fought for independence. Many nations struggled to regain their freedom. And these struggles shaped the modern world we live in today. This is why the history of the British Empire is both powerful and controversial. It is one of the most important chapters in human history. Here is something interesting. Even though the British Empire was the largest empire ever, it was not the longest lasting empire in history. Some empires lasted longer in certain forms. For example, the Roman Empire influenced the world for centuries, but in terms of global reach and size, nothing matched the British Empire. It connected continents like never before. It shaped languages, economies, and cultures, and its impact can still be seen today. History is full of powerful empires. Some rose quickly. Some lasted for centuries. But only one empire managed to spread across the world in a way that made history change forever. The British Empire became the largest empire humanity had ever seen, an empire so large that the sun truly never set on it. And even though it eventually faded, its legacy continues to shape the modern world. Which raises an interesting question. If another empire tried to control that much of the world today, would it even be possible? Or has history moved beyond the age of empires? That is something historians still debate. And maybe the answer will surprise us again. What if I told you that the largest empire in history was not just powerful, it was unstoppable? At one point, many people believed that this empire would rule the world forever. Its navy dominated the oceans. Its economy influenced global trade. Its culture spread across continents. But something unexpected happened. Despite controlling nearly a quarter of the planet, the empire slowly began to lose its grip on the world. So what went wrong? How does the largest empire in human history begin to collapse? And could something like that ever happen again? To understand this, we need to go deeper into the story, because the rise of this empire was just as fascinating as its fall. Imagine living in a time when one empire had influence almost everywhere you looked. Ships carrying goods traveled across oceans under its protection. Merchants traded across continents, and governments in distant lands followed decisions made thousands of miles away. This was the reality during the height of the British Empire. The empire connected the world like never before. It built global trade networks that changed economies forever. Tea from Asia, cotton from India, resources from Africa, goods moving across the Atlantic. Everything was connected. But power on this scale always comes with challenges, and those challenges slowly started growing. Empires do not collapse overnight. Instead, the signs appear slowly. At first, they are almost invisible. But over time, they become impossible to ignore. One of the earliest challenges the empire faced was resistance from colonies. As time passed, people living under imperial rule started asking an important question: why should distant rulers control our land? This question sparked movements across different regions. Some protests were peaceful. Others turned into full struggles for independence. These moments began changing the future of the empire. Another major factor was the rapid transformation of the world. Technology was advancing. Countries were becoming stronger. New global powers were emerging, and the balance of power was slowly shifting. Then came one of the most important turning points in history: World War I. This global conflict changed everything. The war placed enormous pressure on the empire's economy and military. Although the empire survived the war, the cost was massive, and it was only the beginning, because a second global conflict was about to reshape the world even more dramatically. World War II became the turning point that accelerated the decline of the empire. After the war ended, the world was no longer the same. Many countries wanted independence. National movements became stronger, and maintaining such a huge empire became increasingly difficult. Britain realized that holding on to every colony was no longer possible. Slowly, territories began gaining independence. India's independence in 1947 became one of the most significant moments in modern history. After that, many other regions followed the same path. Over the next few decades, the map of the world changed dramatically.